It was the greatest library the world had ever seen. Hundreds of thousands of scrolls, the collected knowledge of Greece, Egypt, Babylon, India, and beyond. Mathematicians, astronomers, poets, and physicians from across the known world traveled here for one reason: to read, to learn, and to add their own work to the collection. And then it burned. To this day, people argue about how it happened. Was it Julius Caesar? Was it religious zealots centuries later? Was it neglect, slow and quiet, rather than fire and chaos? The truth is messier than any single villain. The Library of Alexandria didn't die in one dramatic night. It died slowly, over centuries, through war, politics, and indifference. But the myth of one great fire has captured our imagination for 2,000 years. And tonight, we're going to look at why. To understand the library, you have to understand the man who built the city around it, Alexander the Great. In 331 BCE, Alexander founded a new city on the Egyptian coast and named it after himself. Modestly, as always, he didn't live to see it grow. He died young, and his empire was carved up among his generals. One of those generals, Ptolemy, took Egypt for himself. And Ptolemy, and especially his son, Ptolemy II, had an audacious idea. What if you built a library that contained everything, every book ever written in every language gathered in one place? Not just a library in the way we think of one today, a quiet building with shelves. The Library of Alexandria was part of a massive research institution named after the Muses. Think of it less like a public library and more like a combination of Harvard, the Library of Congress, and a National Science Academy, all rolled into one, funded by the wealthiest kingdom in the Mediterranean. The Ptolemies were not subtle about how they acquired books, either. Ships that docked in Alexandria's harbor were searched. If they carried scrolls, those scrolls were confiscated, copied, and depending on who you ask, sometimes the copies were given back to the original owners, while the libraries kept the originals. Legend says the library once borrowed official Athenian copies of plays by Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, and forgot to return them, forfeiting a massive deposit instead. Whether that's true or exaggerated, it tells you everything about the library's reputation. It got what it wanted. At its peak, estimates suggest that the library held anywhere from 40,000 to 400,000 scrolls. Even the low end of that range dwarfed anything else in the ancient world. For roughly 2.5 centuries, Alexandria was the intellectual capital of the world, and the names associated read like a syllabus for the history of science. Euclid worked here, laying down the foundations of geometry that students would study for the next 2,000 years. Eratosthenes was the library's chief librarian, and he used shadows, sticks, and basic geometry to calculate the circumference of the Earth. His estimate was remarkably close to the actual figure. This was happening before the year 0. Archimedes studied in Alexandria before returning to Syracuse. He'd go on to anticipate calculus, design war machines, and famously run through the streets shouting, "Eureka!" Herophilus performed some of the earliest documented human dissections here, mapping the nervous system in the heart with a level of detail that wouldn't be matched again for over 1,000 years. This wasn't just a place where old knowledge was stored, it was a place where new knowledge was actively being created, funded by the state, debated in real time, and copied for distribution across the ancient world. If you wanted to know anything, astronomy, medicine, literature, engineering, Alexandria was where you would find it, or to find the people who knew it. So how does something so important just fall apart? The first major blow happened in 48 BCE, and it involves one of history's most famous names, Julius Caesar. Caesar arrived in Alexandria chasing his rival, Pompey, and found himself pulled into an Egyptian civil war between the siblings Cleopatra and Ptolemy, outnumbered and cornered near the harbor. Caesar's forces repeatedly set fire to the Egyptian fleet docked there to stop it from being used against them. And fire near a harbor in a city built largely of wood, stone, and densely packed buildings does not stay contained. Several ancient writers, including the Roman geographer Strabo and the historian Plutarch, record that the fire spread from the docks into the city itself, and that it damaged or destroyed buildings, including warehouses that may have stored books, possibly even part of the library's collection. Here's where it gets murky, though. Some ancient sources are vague. Some later writers may have exaggerated the damage for dramatic effect. Caesar burning the Great Library makes for a much better story than some warehouse near the docks caught fire during a siege. What's most likely is this. The fire of 48 BCE damaged some part of Alexandria's book collection. Maybe warehouses storing scrolls intended for export. Maybe an annex of the library. But the main institution, the museum itself, almost certainly survived. Scholars continued working in Alexandria for centuries afterwards. The library wasn't gone, but it had taken its first wound. This is the part of the story that doesn't make it into the dramatic retellings, because slow decline doesn't make for a great thumbnail. After Caesar, Egypt eventually became a Roman province. And Rome, for all its administrative talent, did not treat Alexandria's scholarly community the way the Ptolemies once had. Funding shifted. Political tensions in the city between different ethnic and religious communities, between Alexandria and Rome, flared up repeatedly. There are records of riots, of emperors punishing the city, of scholars being expelled or fleeing. The Museon's scholarly community shrank. Some sources suggest that by the 3rd century CE, much of the original library's collection had already been lost. Not in one fire, but through neglect, through scrolls decaying and not being recopied, through funding drying up, through the slow erosion of the institution's prestige. In 272 CE, the Roman Emperor Aurelian fought to retake Alexandria from forces loyal to the breakaway Palmyrene Empire, and the fighting damaged the royal quarter of the city. The area where the original library complex had stood, by most accounts, this is where the original Museon-era library, in any meaningful form, ceased to exist. But the story doesn't end here, because there's a second institution people often confuse with the first. There was another major institution in Alexandria, the Serapeum, a great temple dedicated to the god Serapis, which also housed a significant library, sometimes called a daughter library to the original. By the late 4th century CE, the Roman Empire had become Christian, and tensions between Christians and followers of traditional Greco-Roman religion in Alexandria were intense. In 391 CE, the Roman Emperor Theodosius I issued edicts banning pagan worship. In Alexandria, this set off violent unrest. According to historical accounts, the Christian patriarch Theophilus oversaw the destruction of pagan temples in the city, including the Serapeum. The Serapeum, with its library, was destroyed during this period. Whatever scrolls remained there were lost, through destruction, through dispersal, or simply through the chaos of a temple complex being torn apart. This is something folded into the Library of Alexandria burned narrative, but by this point, 391 CE, the original Museon library had already been gone for over a century. What was destroyed at the Serapeum was a related but separate collection, the last major remnant of Alexandria's once legendary library tradition. So what did we actually lose? We don't fully know, and that's part of the tragedy. We know some names, works of Aristotle that exist today only in fragments or summaries written by later authors. plays by major Greek playwrights that survived only as titles in ancient catalogs, with no surviving text. Entire schools of mathematical and astronomical thought that we know existed because other ancient writers referenced them, but the original work themselves are gone. Historians have a term for this: the great unknown. We can't measure the loss precisely because the things that were lost are, by definition, things we no longer have a record of. Some historians push back on the romanticism of the library that held all the human knowledge and then it was gone forever. They point out that copies of important works existed in other cities: Rome, Constantinople, Pergamon, Antioch, and that many texts survived through those other channels, later preserved by Byzantine and Islamic scholars through the medieval period. But even with that caveat, something real was lost. Not just scrolls, but a symbol. The idea that a society could build an institution dedicated purely to gathering and expanding human knowledge, funded for its own sake, open to scholars regardless of where they came from. The Library of Alexandria has become kind of a myth, a single dramatic image of robed scholars fleeing flames of centuries of human knowledge turning into ash in one night. The real story is less cinematic, but in some ways more haunting. It wasn't one fire. It was war, then neglect, then more war, then religious conflict, stretched across nearly 400 years until one day the greatest library in the ancient world simply wasn't there anymore. And maybe that's the real lesson. Knowledge isn't lost in a single dramatic moment most of the time. It's lost slowly, when no one is funding it, when no one is copying it, when no one thinks to ask, what happens if we let this go? If you found this interesting, let me know in the comments, and subscribe to Lost Century for more deep dives into the moments that shaped human history.